when we have to find a theta. Actually, it should be a theta. So, in order to be able to find a specific value of theta or some angle, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to figure out how do you undo trig. Well, all of this stuff. What's that? Oh, thanks. All of this stuff in math, everything has its own inverse relation. What I want you guys to think about here real quick are, what are inverse operations? What does it mean to use an inverse operation? Opposite, okay? To undo something. Okay. Think of it that way. What is the inverse of addition?
Subtraction.
Inverse of squaring.
Divide.
Square root, good. What is the inverse of divide? Multiply, and so on. So, when you are using an inverse operation, for example, with multiplication. Oh, is there? That's why I teach math. So, what I want you to think of is this. What you would do here to find to undo multiply by 4, you would divide by 4, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what I want you to do real quick is take your calculator out, and I want you to see that there's a -1 button. The -1 button stands for inverse. And what I want you to do is hit the -1 button, and what does it spit out?
I don't see it. Where is that 1/4?
I think it's right by the x squared, somewhere in there. So the inverse of inverse of 4 is 1/4. So if I multiply both sides by an inverse, isn't that the same thing as dividing by 4? Isn't multiplying by 1/4 the exact same thing as dividing by 4? Because that's an inverse. 4's inverse is -1/4. Yes, ma'am?
What if you don't have that function on your
You do.
Yours is, you have to use
You can do, oh, here. You can do this. So if I do 4, this, thing.
Okay.
Do you see that on yours? You do 4, the exponent squared, go to the -1. Yes, sir?
So basically,
Shh, guys.
so what you're doing is you're just like putting the 1 under the 4 and making it to the negative.
Well, the -1 button means inverse. Okay. It's how you undo multiply. So what I'm getting at here is, eventually, so if we're still going on, guys. You're quizzing on this stuff on Friday, so I'd appreciate if you just stop clock. What we're looking at being able to do here is to isolate theta. Theta is going to be our variable. Theta is going to be what we're trying to solve for. Well, what in essence you're doing is some trig value is going to equal some side divided by some other side. I don't know what sides those are. It could be an opposite, it could be adjacent, it could be a hypotenuse. It's just sides of the right triangle. Now, what happens here is, what we do is we take the inverse on both sides, because numbers are jealous. What you do to one side, you have to do to another. Here's what it looks like. Bless you. I get this trig inverse times some trig would be trig inverse of my two sides divided out. Now remember, what I'm doing here is writing this out long form so I can show you guys why things simplify. Okay? Now, Bless you.
Aw.
A minute ago, we wrote down that 4 to the negative 1 was 1/4. Trig to the negative 1 would be negative 1. This is negative 1 for most of you, I'm assuming. So trig to the negative 1 would be 1 over trig. So here's what happens. What happens with that? What's trigonometry divided by trigonometry? No. What's 4 divided by 4?
1.
What's 2 divided by 2? What's negative 6 divided by negative 6? What's trig divided by trig? 1. So they undo each other. That's why you get that by itself. So whenever you have to solve for your angle, you're going to use the inverse button. That is the only time that we solve, that's the only time we use the inverse button. So, trig inverse, theta will always equal trig inverse of something divided by something else, side over side. This is for only solving for an angle. You only use the inverse button when you're solving for an angle, okay? Now, you'll see on your calculators, you've got a slew of inverse trig functions. Excuse me. Come on, there we go. If you look at your calculator, you guys have sine to the negative 1, cosine to the negative 1, tangent to the negative 1, above sine, cosine, tangent. In order to get to those, you have to hit the button that says second. So really, in essence, what we're doing different from the past few days is we're pressing one extra button. That's it. You still isolate and figure out what trig function you're going to use. You still write down exactly what you're going to do, and then you press a button.
So we just, the difference is pressing second.
Yeah. Let me show you an example.
On ours, we just have to double press the button.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. And then it'll change to
So let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this.
And then if you press the button, or you can pass over there.
Let's start with this one. Shh. Come on, guys. Enough. A lot of times they're going to say, find the missing angle. And they'll use a question mark, maybe use theta, they might use x. But it's a lot of find the missing angle. I'm going to try and remind you guys that that's the value of theta that you're looking for. So if I'm looking for this, I start there again. And what is your angle always looking at? It's always looking at the opposite. If that's my opposite, 14 is mine, and 23 is mine. So, which of the three uses adjacents and hypotenuse? Cosine. Which means I do the same scenario. I'm asking the same questions. I'm writing the same things out. The cosine of some angle is 14 over 23. And this boils back to the idea, to figure out what theta is, I have to take the inverse trig. Well, which trig function am I using? Which means I'm going to do the inverse cosine. So that means that my next step would be theta is the cosine inverse 14 over 23. Ladies, what do you guys move? I'm done telling you guys to stop talking to each other. Now, move. There's an empty seat over here. What do you guys move? And when you do this, did you hear me? One of you guys move. I'm done telling you both of you guys to stop talking. Now, get up and move. Yeah, go. Every day. 4 times a day I tell both of you guys to stop talking. It's enough. By writing this out like this, just like everything else, it shows me that you know what you're about to put in the calculator. It shows me you know the right buttons to press, and then you press the buttons. What do you get for theta?
52.50.
What was it?
52.50.
5250? I think that's what we got last time too. Do you have to put the degree symbol?
No.
No, it's not the end of the world. It really isn't. Okay? And it's the same thing each and every time. It's which one are you setting up, just like we have. This time we don't know what the angle is before we did. And you figure out the angle going the other direction. Yes, ma'am? No, ma'am. That's all you need to know. Well, once you write, well, by now that's pretty easy.
Wait, what?
There's only 2. Okay. Same deal. Start the problem the exact same way again. We have some angle. That angle will always, always, always look at its opposite. Very good. Angles always look to their opposites. There's your opposite, which makes the 28A a hypotenuse. Good. Now you can pick your trig. Which trig are you going to use? Sine, cosine, or tangent? Write it out. The sine of something, I don't know what that is, but I'm going to find it, is 15 over 28. Which means to get theta then by itself, what button do you have to press? Second sine, good. So your angle is the inverse sine of 15 over 28. And then press buttons. You always show what you're going to do before you do it. Okay? That's my requirement. You've got to show me what you're doing before you do it. In doing that, it's very easy for me to figure out if you know the difference between sine, cosine, and tangent, if you know which one's opposites and adjacents by labeling it, but it also forces you to know what goes where because you're writing it out every single time. Okay, what'd you guys get for an angle?
32.39.
This came up first hour. If this ever happens to be a fraction that you can simplify, do you have to? No, because you're just going to press buttons in the calculator. Yeah, the calculator's going to do it for you all anyway. Okay. Another question that came up before was, what did you do if you don't? What do you do if you don't have a calculator? You have to buy one, or you'd have to use trig tables. Or Desmos, or whatever, yeah. When we did this, when I was in high school, which doesn't seem that long ago, really. That was. Shut up. If I look at this,
2001. No, it's 1994. What?
if I look at this one, I'll show you what we used to have to do. You guys are lucky. You guys have gotten made. We have a theta. The opposite is how much?
11.
Do we have the adjacent?
Yes.
That's the hypotenuse.
Yeah. The adjacent, come on, guys.
So which trig function are you going to use here?
Tan.
Tangent.
So last time I checked,
Sine.
tangent doesn't have a hypotenuse.
Yeah, come on, guys. It's not tangent.
Which one?
It's sin. Sine.
Oh.
Sine theta equal.
Okay. So what would happen then is that you know that your angle is going to be whatever whichever one has a sign value, that is 11 over 31. Well, not having a calculator, you have to take 11 divided by 31 and figure out the decimal. And this goes into knowing basic numbers and how things are set up about approximations. Okay? So if I go through this, 31 doesn't go into 10, or excuse me, 11, but it'll go into 110 3 times. And you just continue to go through it. So this would be a 0.3, so we have 393, subtract out 170.
I'd probably cry if I didn't have a TI 30X.
And then I would go again, and I'd approximate out. If I go 3 times 5 is 15, 3 times 6 is 18, so it has to be a 5. And I go backwards that way. So you're, you're reaching for the phone, waiting for me to turn around so you can text somebody. And I go through it again. And I continue going through that over and over again to figure out some decimal equivalencies, and so on. Well, then you'd have a book. You'd have a book that had all of the trig values in table form, where you'd have to go through and figure out what angle has a sine value of what. So right now, I'm at 0.354 something. I'd look through here for sine, and I'd look to see where's a 0.354. Okay, so somewhere between 20 and 21 is 354. So I'd have to go through these tables. This is just a single page table. We had books where it was, you'd get to the degree value, and then the next page over would be how to get to your tenths, how to get to your hundredths and stuff. So I'd have to look at the table, 0.3584. What's a little bit more than that? So somewhere between 20 and 21 degrees. And I'd have to continue flipping pages back and forth trying to figure out where everything goes to get the answers, because we didn't have calculators that did this. So the answer here is probably around 20 point something.
20.7.
And that's what you would have to do. It sucked. It absolutely sucked.
But doesn't that make you tired?
Not really. It just means, what it means is that it gave me the idea that anytime I have a sine value, if I have an angle that's close to 30 degrees, plus or minus something, I know the sine value is around a half, because the sine of 30 is 1/2. I knew that. I knew cosine values of 60 is also 1/2, because anytime I'm around a 60-degree angle, then I have to find a cosine. If it's there, it's around a half. I knew approximations. One of the skills that they don't teach you guys very much anymore is that idea of approximating. How can you get close-ish without doing the math? And that was where a lot of the table stuff came from, because you were able to do that. That's why long division is such a lost art, because I didn't go straight to the 31. I thought in my head, hey, it's 30, 3 times 5 is 15, so that's got to be close to this. If I use 83 times 6 is 18, it's more. So I'm doing those approximations. That's a skill. I almost lost it. That's a skill that you guys were never taught, because as soon as they could, what they give you?
A calc.
Give you a calculator. And that's a shame. That's not good. What's that?
That's cool.
It's not a good thing. Because what'll happen
Why
then,
isn't it good?
well, it's not so much a good thing. Well, honestly, it's because of the estimation. Estimation, being close-ish, being able to approximate surface areas, volumes, how much stuff you'll have to buy in order to not have to return anything. Those skills are stuff that I was taught because of knowing how to work with, manipulate numbers on a small scale, that I could bring it out larger scale, which makes sense in the real world. I can count ceiling tiles. I can count these 4 tiles. These 4 tiles are 18 inches. I know that I can go all the way across here and figure out these are 16. Go all the way across, I can figure out rather quickly how much floor space I would need if I had to figure out how much cleaner to buy to scrub the floors because the wax is bad. It's little things like that without having to use tape measures, without having to do that. It's being able to go into a bedroom and be able to look at a bedroom knowing that if I'm 6 feet tall, if I lie down and put my arm out, it's 8 foot. If there's 2 of me that can lie down, I can guesstimate my wall space is 12 foot by 8. I know how many gallons of paint to use without having to measure everything by hand. It's little things like that. And that's one skill that you guys weren't taught very much back in the day.
Well, I'm glad.
What I want you
Everybody
guys
in this class feels that you're doing.
No, you don't feel like that. I don't want you to say that. It's just one of those things that it's just not taught. It's just not taught anymore. I've got here for you guys basically the same things we've been looking at. Write out your steps. Write out your steps. Show all of the work prior to putting anything in your calculator. Okay? Show all the work prior to putting anything in your calculator, and then round it out to the nearest hundred, just like we have been. But I want you guys to show, just like we've done, show the specific steps as you're going through. By doing that, it forces you to slow down, and it forces you to remember which one is which.
Yeah, no, it's not.
I think you did the inverse. You probably just, yeah, I did the inverse one, and then now you type in 15 over 28. Now it'll work.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You had a long string of stuff all put together. That's it.
Nice underarm.
Huh?
Nice underarm.
Okay, you're the president of I need to reset it. Error. Yeah, bud.
Are we doing both sides?
Yes, sir, please. Oh, you know why? I know why. What's happening was,
Oh my God.
Kevin, cut it out. No, absolutely. All right. For some odd reason, your calculator had a bunch of stuff that got all messy, like stored in there for some reason. If that ever happens again, what I saw was that there was another secondary inverse that got put in there. There's a button on the back. To reset it, just click it, your pencil, or just hold on for a minute or two. Turn off the second and say that bring it here and just reset it. Because you weren't doing it wrong. You had all your stuff right on that. That's the thing. Go through the steps. You know what you're doing. You say, oh, when I screw up, and I can say, oh, you're talking about flat out. I can fix it. So don't forget to doing that. Just keep working through. Plus, the other thing that happens is that if you ever do get there, you can see that 48 divided by 15. And then you'll get your error. That's the reason why you make that sign. Make it big. That's why I wanted to see if you had to do it. Have a good one, guys.